In April of 1989, Nintendo introduced mobile gaming as a serious platform with the Game Boy, and boy did people flock to it. Everyone from kids to politicians were carrying around a brick in their bag just to play black and white video games. But there were other games on the Game Boy besides Pocket Monsters and Tetris. Hey everybody, I'm Josh, and I want to talk about the Spider-Man games on the Game Boy. There were 3 original Spider-Man games for the OG Game Boy. But Josh, there were actually 6 games if you count the Gameboy Color. Shut up. Those are ports of games from different systems and a sequel to a game I'll be covering in a different video. But the first one came out in 1990 and was simply called The Amazing Spider-Man. It was made by a small studio that you've probably never heard about. Rare. Yeah, that Rare. The Rare that made every game your weird uncle loved growing up. The game was programmed by Chris Sutherland, who had programmed classic games like Donkey Kong Country, and was also the voice of the Killer Instinct announcer for all 3 Killer Instinct games. Like most superhero games from back then, The Amazing Spider-Man was a side-scrolling beat-em-up that had the webhead on an adventure to rescue his kidnapped wife, Mary Jane, from an assortment of classic Spider-Man rogues. We've got Mysterio, Hobgoblin, Rhino, Scorpion, Doc Ock, and Venom all as bosses. But the story of this game is weird. Spider-Man has like a phone or radio thing that the villains talk to him with between levels. Mainly it's just for trading threats to one another, but the first thing that happens is that Mysterio tells Spider-Man he actually knows who he is and that he has MJ.
Spider-Man's name is Peter Parker. What the?
Yeah, so every bad guy in this game just knows that Spider-Man is actually Peter Parker. This never actually matters in the real story of the game. Like, they didn't have to include that, and it makes no sense to why they did. But now we're off to fight Mysterio with Scoliosis Spider-Man. So let's talk about how this game feels to play. It's not great. Which for an original Game Boy game that was made in 1990, it's to be expected. Spider-Man can punch, low kick, jump kick, and shoot webs to take out what seems to be the entirety of New York in an alleyway. Seriously, this is supposed to be the alley right outside of his apartment. How are there so many people here that want to kill him? There are thugs running at him, shooting at him, or just leaning out of windows to swing a bat at him. Even the lizard is here to take swipes at his ankles. So all of the attacks in this game, minus the web attack, are very unsafe, and their hitboxes are super finicky. There were plenty of times when I was touching another character with my attack, and it did no damage. No attack from you has priority in this game, so you'll end up trading damage with enemies, which is fine for normal enemies, but this sucks for bosses because you do such little damage to them already, and they do so much damage to you so fast. The movement in this game is also a bit rigid, but it's a Game Boy game, so we'll have to let it slide. The worst part about this movement is the jumping. You have 2 types of jumping in this game. There's the regular jump, which you do by pressing A, and then there's the super jump. And this super jump is so unresponsive that it led to me getting stuck in certain locations until I could pull it off. Eventually, I had to track down this game's manual just to make sure I was doing it right. So while moving left or right and pressing A, Spidey should super jump. But I tested it and I had like a 40% success rate at best. And what makes it worse is that this is the only way you can web swing in this game, which is a required mechanic to finish the later rooftop levels. Speaking of levels, there are only 2 types of levels in this game. The first is what you just saw, a very typical side-scrolling beat-em-up with some light platforming thrown in. The second type is a vertical wall-crawling level where you're dodging bombs, people with bats, and actual bats sometimes. Now there are only 2 of these levels, and to me, they're the most fun thing in this game. They are frantic. Your spider sense will be going off to warn you of bombs coming down from the top of the screen. You'll be hitting dudes who are peeking out of windows. And even in the second one later in the game, after the game has gotten way more difficult and way more unfair, these levels still feel fair and fun. There should have been way more of these. But after that first wall crawling level, you've seen everything this game has to offer. After this, it only gets harder to the point of being unfair as it goes on, especially in those final 3 levels or so. The rooftop levels have pits that you have to web swing across. There is a subway level that is constantly scrolling. And then at the end of every side-scrolling level, you fight a boss that range from easy to annoying to just downright unfair. So that guy right there, that's Venom. He's the final boss of this game. And Jesus Christ, this dude is straight ridiculous. He's on a constant loop of moving up and down on either side of the screen and just spams projectiles nonstop. Your webs and attacks do next to nothing to him, and his webs drain your health for every moment you are touching them. You go from superhero in this game to super victim. Venom is so unfair that the developer gave themselves 44 lives just for this fight, according to this picture in the actual official manual. So I don't feel bad about using save states in this game right now. The only way I could beat this war criminal of a boss was to cheese him. If I crouched in just the correct spot on the left side of the screen, I could low kick him on his way down, and then when he came from the other side, I could jump his webs. That is certified
cheese.
And then congrats. We've saved MJ, and all our enemies know who we are. Woo, I think. This game really shows its age, and it's fun for the first couple levels, but I don't really recommend it unless you already have nostalgia for it though. So 2 years after Rare did their attempt at Spider-Man, LJN handed the webs over to a studio called Bit Studio that mainly worked on licensed games during their life as a studio. They obviously did not like the classic beat-em-up direction that the previous game went with, so they went and changed it. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is now a side-scrolling exploration game with items and puzzles, which is weird, but the music on the main menu goes kinda hard. From the rip, you can tell this is a different style of game from the last one. Spider-Man takes up so much less room on the screen, and you can go up and down now. Spidey's moves have also changed. Web swinging is now much easier by holding up and A. Spidey will just attach a web to any surface above him, and boom, you're swinging. Also, the jump is a bit easier. By quickly double tapping A, you can now double jump, and if you do that at a wall, bam, you're wall crawling. Congrats, you can now do everything a spider can do. So the story for this one is that Spider-Man has been framed for a bank robbery, and the webhead has to get past 5 different villains to clear his name. Returning from the last game, we have Hobgoblin, Mysterio, and the Lizard. He was technically in the last game. And new to this game, we have Carnage and Gravitron?
Huh?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I had to look this one up. I could not figure out who this was when I was in the game. So he's kind of like a nobody D-lister at best, but don't worry about him. You may have also noticed this game has comic book cutscenes as its level interstitials that help tell the player what they need to do and where to go. We get some cool cameos from other Marvel superheroes like the Human Torch, Captain America, and I think this is supposed to be Daredevil and Wolverine, but don't get too excited about them. They are nowhere to be seen in the actual gameplay of this game. But like I said earlier, this game is one big puzzle, where you explore the levels to find items that can get you into doors or use other things in the world. For example, very early on, you find a crowbar, which lets you go into a house that's boarded up. Then later in the same level, you find a key card that can also open doors. But there is some old school puzzle game logic on display as well. In the first level, you're constantly being bombarded with pumpkin bombs from Hobgoblin, who is flying around at the top of the level. He can't be hurt with your punches, kicks, or web blasts, so obviously you would figure he's just a hazard that needs to be avoided. So you scroll all the way to the right of the level and you get greeted by an electric fence that sets off your spider sense and will kill you if you attempt to jump it. So what are you supposed to do? Well, obviously you're supposed to web swing on Hobgoblin's glider to weigh it down so it falls to the ground. Then you have to beat Hobgoblin up as he jumps around like a kid who just chugged 2 ghosts and got his iPad taken away. And this is where we see how rough the fighting is in this game. All of the problems with the last game are here and are somehow a little worse. The trend of attacks not hitting enemies even when they make visual contact is a plague on these Game Boy games. Now, the game sort of helps you out with this problem by having strength upgrades to the levels, so that fights were never as annoying as Venom was in the last game. Once we've beat up Hobgoblin, he drops a key for us that lets us get into a locked building that has a can of oil. Then with this can of oil, we can go find his glider and somehow use that to ride it out of the level. Now, this doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's really cool to me, and I enjoyed getting to ride the glider. So far, for the first level, I thought it was kind of fun. And even though some of the puzzle logic doesn't make sense, I really did enjoy exploring the level, which is good because the next level is much larger. It has 4 distinct areas, including an industrial place, sewers, a factory, and an amusement park. And this part is the majority of the game. We're going to start in the industrial section where we'll be dodging flamethrowers and drippy things until we get to the end of the environment. You see this hole here? This hole right here? This is a new player trap. It leads to the sewers, where you don't need to be yet. I spent over 30 minutes lost down there trying to figure out what to do while I was being bullied by bats, rats, and the frickin' lizard. But I finally get out and go to the building with the key card and then got a cutscene telling me to make an antidote for the lizard, which would have been nice to know earlier. So we make the antidote, beat up the lizard, and he drops us a key code so we can get into a building we passed earlier. So now it's time to backtrack to a building in the industrial park we passed earlier. This building has the only platforming in the game that can instantly kill you, and it has these floating, exploding balls everywhere and all the drippy tips we saw from outside. This part of the game solely exists to cheaply burn your health and lives, since there hasn't been anything else in the game that will so far. But after a few precarious jumps, we make it to Gravitron. And this is barely a boss fight. He raises rocks from the bottom of the screen and drops them to damage you. And all you have to do is crawl up there, jump on his platform, and beat the living hell out of him.
Fight back! Fight back!
He can't even hurt you while you're up there, I'm pretty sure. Like I said, straight D-list villain. Then the Human Torch tells us the power is back on the amusement park so we can go deal with Carnage. So back through the sewer again, and all the way to the amusement park. Here, Carnage is just going to spawn in relentlessly and try to hit you, but you can't fight him. You just ignore him and climb this ladder to ride the roller coaster. And this roller coaster is the real boss fight of this game. You have to hang off this cage and avoid platforms that will knock you off and make you have to start all the way over. Now, this part would have been okay if it wasn't so long and so fast. On the Game Boy screen, it can be very hard to distinguish what can knock you off and what is the background. So it'll take you many tries of just rote memorization until you get it right. Or it can annoy you, and you can throw in a couple save states as checkpoints. Because there is no checkpoint, there is no rest point. You just have to do it perfectly to get through. Now that Carnage is being ignored and he can go on his killing spree, all of the Marvel superheroes tell Spider-Man that Mysterio is in a blimp and we need to beat him up. So this is where the game drops all the exploration concept you've used for the entire game and just becomes a platformer beat 'em up. You have to jump up the side of a building with some pretty rough and demanding jumps. All the while, you're getting shot at by jetpackers and dudes from windows. And the dudes shooting from the windows can get stuck in an endless loop of shooting in a circle faster than you can move. Like, what am I supposed to do here? But we finally get all the way to the top, and now there's a blimp dropping bombs on us. So we time it right, web ourselves inside, and now it's time to fight Mysterio. And this fight is annoying. There are 2 platforms that Mysterio can appear on, and you can't reach the top with a basic double jump. You have to web swing to get yourself up there. And during that time, Mysterio clones are spawning in and triggering an attack with a massive range that you cannot see other than your spider sense warning you that it's coming. And you have to try to hit the correct Mysterio faster than he can get his attack off, which is a pain in the tuchus. And you just do that a few times and ta-da, you win the game. So the last 2 or 3 levels of this game ended on kind of a sour note. But the rest of the game is a cool concept and is better than it had any right to be. It wasn't great, and some of the things you have to do are a little obtuse, but it's a solid and different concept than what the other superhero games were doing at the time. I wish it doubled down on the Metroidvania aspect a little bit more, and this could have been a hidden gem on the Game Boy. But don't worry, Bit Studio gets one more attempt at Spider-Man on the Game Boy. There are plenty of decent games where the sequel vastly improves on the original. You have Assassin's Creed to Assassin's Creed 2, Borderlands to Borderlands 2, Witcher to Witcher 2. You get my point. But very rarely does a developer get a second shot at a game and they mess it up so badly. Amazing Spider-Man 3 Invasion of the Spider Slayers is that kind of game. Once again, Bit Studios got to make a Spider-Man game after their decent first attempt with the Amazing Spider-Man 2 in the August of 1992. 11 months later, they released this game.
Swing into action against Razorwing, bolt-firing Spider Slayers in the all-new Spider-Man 3 Invasion of the Spider Slayers for Game Boy from LJN.
It's based loosely off the story from the Amazing Spider-Man comic. The game has Spider-Man being accosted by robots of all kinds that are trying to kill him, and he wants to figure out who's making them. Whatever. Let's talk about this game and how Bit Studio took anything you may have liked from the previous game and just ruined it. The levels are now stage-based, similar to the first game, and it follows a more traditional beat-em-up style, Vice the adventure game style that we saw in the previous game. The first level has you hunting down thugs in the park, and it starts out pretty promising, where you have to actually determine if these people in trench coats who are walking around are thugs or just normal people. And the way you figure this out is you have to wait for them to reach into their coats, and they'll either pull out a newspaper or a blicky. And if they pull out a gun, you take them out with a punch. But there's no negative to punching the regular people other than losing points, so, have at it. There are also these whack-ass kids riding skateboards that will knock you around that are super annoying, but that's okay. You can just jump. Oh my god, what was that? Yeah, you saw that right. Somehow they've ruined jumping in a Spider-Man game. To jump, Spider-Man has a full crouching animation where it takes a little bit of time before you actually get into the air. So when you press the A button, you don't jump immediately, which becomes a problem in the very next level. So screw jumping, we'll just hit these kids. Okay. Attacking is somehow even more unresponsive than the previous games. I mean, look how many times I hit this guy before it even registers. And no, he is not invincible before they pull out either the newspaper or the gun, because I hit the others in this level just fine. Well, okay, maybe this game is like the last one, and it isn't focused on combat. It's a little more puzzly. Maybe this is introducing a mechanic where we'll have to determine who's going to be an enemy and who's not for when the Spider Slayers join the fray. Nah, we never revisit this idea. But you can ride the kid's skateboard. So the next level, we are immediately attacked by this xenomorph-looking thing that is called the Spider Slayer Mark X. And holy crap, chill out, bro. This thing is relentless. It never stops shooting, and the only way to win is to smack it with your feet arms a few good times until it goes away. But you have to tank a lot of damage because you cannot get out of the way of those shots. Thank goodness Spidey isn't fragile in this game. This level is over in like 20 seconds, and we're on to the next one. And this level encapsulates everything that is wrong with this game. Spider-Man is being attacked by a big robot bird that will constantly shoot fast-moving projectiles at you and drop rocks from up high. There's also these tiny metal spiders that will do damage to you if you touch them, and they will be with us for the rest of the game, don't you worry. And all you have to do is ascend these two towers by doing almost pixel-perfect platforming when you haven't even had time to learn how the platforming works in this game. The double jump, web swing, and wall crawling all return from the previous game, but are somehow worse and less responsive. So not only are you learning how to deal with these unreliable mechanics, you're also getting constantly pelted by projectiles and little miniature spiders. Also, it isn't clear how to get up this tower. Like, how am I supposed to get up here? Obviously, I have to double jump and cast a web up. But it will only work with really good timing, and it's not clear to you if you try it a few times and your web doesn't stick. It took me over 30 minutes to successfully climb the towers the first time. And once you get to the top, you have to divine the fact that you need to swing up off the screen to get to the boss fight on top of the bird. But once we get to the top of the bird, the same problems we encountered before are there to stop us. So we have to kick this bird's head while somehow not getting hit, but you can't just hit it. You have to hit it just right so it causes damage. But don't get too close, or you'll touch his head and you're going to take damage. Or you'll get shot by a blast. And don't get knocked off the bird either, because you will fall all the way to the bottom and die. It is not fun in the slightest. It is aggravating. I celebrated more at killing this dude than when I beat Bloodborne for the first time. Next, we have to fight Electro while cops walk around and doing absolutely nothing, and some dick in a jetpack is firing down on us. Look, we just worry about hitting Electro when he's not shocky and the level's over. Then we go inside a building where never-ending Jetpack Man is here again, and we have to try to lure Electro to this high voltage thing so he hits it. and you can exit out of the top of the level while trying not to have an epileptic seizure. Sounds easy, but between this game's already awful platforming and this son of a bitch always hitting you, it becomes a test of patience and anger management. Next, we go to the Tinkerer's Hideout, where we have 2 levels of platforming to deal with, while some RC planes try to hit us. So much easier than the bird level and would have made for a better tutorial on how to do the platforming. And these levels are much chiller. We just jump around, get to the top, and we're done with the levels. But then we get to the scrolling level that has fire and these exploding balls that are basically unavoidable damage. Oh, and the worst part about the scrolling level is that if you move too far forward on the screen, the scrolling will stop. So you have to back up, usually into danger, to progress. Like, look at these hydraulic presses. I scoot under the second one like I'm obviously meant to, and the game just stops moving the screen. So I have to go back and take a hit. Then we just do a quick fight with Scorpion and move on, all the while my will to live is being drained from me. Next is the level that made me quit this godforsaken game. It's a construction site covered in a ton of those tiny metal spiders and a few big robot ones that you have to beat up to progress. Now, as you take out the big spiders, a new one will show up until you're faced with the Spider Slayer Mark 15 from the comic book. It looks like a Black Widow and is about 10 times as deadly. It moves around the screen super fast. It's always right out of range and is always shooting at you. I worked on this boss for like 2.5 hours and just kept dying. And every time you die, you have to start the whole level all over again and beat up all those spiders again. It is unfair and unfun, and I never want to see it again, or I might become a supervillain myself. So I stopped. I don't need to finish this game. There is nothing for me to gain by making myself miserable just to say I beat this crappy Spider-Man game on the OG Game Boy. Out of the 3 games, this is definitively the worst, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's one of the worst Spider-Man games I play in this journey to review every Spider-Man game. It's just such a disappointment, especially when it had good bones to build on from the previous game. If you want to play this game, don't. Just read the comic book it's based off of. It has better story, art, and gameplay, and it's a damn book. So that was a downer ending to Spidey's standalone adventures on the Game Boy. It started out promising with an okay, but very flawed beat 'em up, then pivoted to an interesting adventure style, but then it crash landed into a pit where only the worst Spider-Man things live.
You're trash.
Spider-Man 3.
Hey, thank you for sticking around. This marks the start of my journey to play and review every Spider-Man game that's ever come out. So subscribe and hit that bell so you can also join me on this adventure. And get in the comments and tell me about your favorite Spider-Man games, or yell at me for hating your favorite game of all time, Amazing Spider-Man 3, Invasion of the Spider Slayers. Actually, if there's one of you who grew up with this game and liked it, I need you to tell me why in the comments. For next time, I'll be playing Spider-Man and the Kingpin, which came out on the Genesis, Master System, and Game Gear. I can only hope that things get better from here.